What is a red flag from an employer that people might not immediately recognize as a red flag?
When an employee quits or gets fired from the job and the company doesn't hire anyone new to replace them. It can be hard to tell as a red flag at first, but the temporary workload they added to your own over that was left over after the person left slowly becomes your new permanent workload, without any changes to your pay or benefits to compensate for the additional tasks. The further out it goes without the position being filled, the larger and more obvious the red flag becomes.
To me it was a "we will start you low, and we'll give you a ton of money later." They never do. Never happens.
They try to sell you their service during your interview. Straight face, it was really bad.
Anything that the manager says in the interview that doesn't line up with the job description. Yeah, we posted it's a manager level position, but this is actually a coordinator role. Yeah, the description says travel is 25%, but it might be closer to 50%, it just depends. We did post it as a remote job, but we prefer people to be in the office X days a week. Yeah, we phrase it that way in the job description because corporate says we have to. All of those are red flags. Anything a company is vague about should be a red flag.
If the job description has a non-descriptively massive salary range, $25,000 to $100,000.
Open interviews. It tells me that people leave faster than you can bring them in, and with good reason.
When you don't get a review until you ask for a raise. Then, all of a sudden, your work is being questioned and you're being berated.
Sorry, no money for your annual raise due to the pandemic. It's a lie.
I know people, rightfully, like to hate on HR, but if a company brags about not having an HR department to deal with, expect them to be very disorganized at a minimum.
Trying to rush a decision out of you once the offer is made. I once interviewed with a company where I would have been relocating across the country to work for them. There were 3 rounds of interviews, and they left me completely in the dark for weeks on end between each round before inviting me to the next round within just a few days of when the interview would take place. After the final interview, it was over a month of silence from them until they made an offer, but told me I had less than 24 hours to let them know my decision. I would have been moving 2,000 miles away from home to a place I had never been or even seen before. Interviews were completely virtual. They wanted me to start 6 days after the offer had been made. When I asked if there was any flexibility for me to have more time to think it over or have more time to move out there, they said no. They needed the decision the next day, and if I accepted, I would be starting in less than a week. I declined the offer.
I always ask the question, why is this role open? Is it a new role, or am I replacing someone? Why did that person leave? This really helps you seeing their reaction, and if they look nervous, it's because the person who left did it because they were not happy. I also like asking how senior my team members are. If there's they're more than 2 years, I would also be concerned. Final question, as I work in sales, I always ask what's the KPIs and how many are actually hitting their quarterly and annual target. This also reveals if they set their targets too high, and you can expect to enter a grim working culture where you're never good enough and can always do better. Last one, I like asking about how they are working to establish a team culture as well, since this will tell you a lot if people at work are friends or just there to do their job.
The sink or swim technique. It was my first day as a cashier. I got a couple of hours of training, then I was by myself and we were dead. All of a sudden this rush came in, and I was asking for help. The manager goes, sink or swim, we're busy back here, figure it out. LOL, I did, but let me tell you, customers were not happy, because I still didn't know how to properly enter in orders, especially modifications.
Interviewed with a regional VP of a billion-dollar company for a sales role. When I asked if the position was a backfill or open due to growth, he stated a backfill. I asked if the person was promoted or moved to a new role, and his response was, we have had more people quit in 2021 than ever, and it's because they can't handle the pressure. Needless to say, I declined the next step in the hiring process.
Asking if I planned to have children in the interview. I was 19.
Competitive pay, but they won't tell you what the pay actually is in the posting or even the interview.
Nobody works here for the money. Why should they work there then?
Everybody is very young in a very old company.
Asking if you are somebody who's willing to put in the time to make sure deadlines are met/work is done, or if you're the type of person who leaves when the workday is finished. This is generally corporate speak for we will be forcing you to work unpaid overtime.
I interviewed once at a very huge organization that had a site in the town I was living in, and these guys were so proud of the new top-of-the-line facilities. When they took me on a tour, they pointed out the lovely Zen garden area that was made for employees to go unwind and clear their heads. The problem with it was this area was positioned directly across from all the higher-ups' offices. Yeah, no.
A couple old senior partners, lots of young employees and nothing in between. That means there's no opportunity to move up, they can't get people to stay, and can't get lateral transfers. They work young folks for as long as they can, and the young folks leave once they figure out the company sucks.
Multiple managers to report to, if you're being interviewed/hired and they tell you will have multiple managers to report to. Basically, if there is not a clear chain of command. What'll happen is eventually one manager's directions, goals or instructions will conflict with the others, and you'll get caught in the middle of it. And one or both will use it against you in performance reviews.
There's a misery wall when walking into work. When you pass a certain point in the building, the feeling changes significantly. If you know, you know.
Anytime they are being sketchy, not being specific, or giving you the runaround in regards to basic questions you'd ask them. Like expected work hours, pay and benefits.
When they refuse to tell you what your starting salary would be, or when they just avoid the question altogether. Like I didn't apply to the job to be a part of some family work culture, I came here to get a job and be paid.
If many provisions in company policy say except for employees in Colorado and California. Colorado and California have multiple statutes that are more employee-friendly than the other 48 states, so the company policy is basically saying we'll do X for employees where the state makes us, but fuck the rest of you.
Poor communication during the hiring process.
Work hard, play hard, you will work so hard, you and your colleagues will need to get totally fucked up at happy hours to cope with the stress.
At my job interview I got asked how do you deal with drama in the workplace. Looking back, I was so stupid to accept that job.
I went on an interview. They had me wait in the lobby. In the 5 minutes I was sitting there, 3 employees walked past me. The first just looked at me and laughed. The second said, "Leave. Leave while you can." The third made the sign of the cross at me. Later, during the interview, the hiring manager showed me the Zen room, which was a quiet room you got to go to for 10 minutes when you got too stressed out. I was offered the job. I declined at 1, they walked by separately at different times too. You had to ask permission to use the Zen room.
It's hard to find good workers these days equals I don't pay enough.